Super Mario Brothers 3!
Super Mario Bros. 3, the last of the NES Mario games and widely considered to be the best one out of the original trilogy. That's not to say that the first two Mario games are bad or anything, far from it, but this game added so many staple mechanics and aspects to the Mario series, on top of just being a great platformer in general. Personally, I don't really have that much experience with this game, so to me, Mario 3 was just the one that everyone wears t-shirts of and the one where Mario becomes a fucking frog. But hopefully I can finally see just what I was missing and see Mario 3 for its other qualities. There's not much else to say, so let's get on with it. This is Super Mario Bros. 3. Super Mario Bros. 3 began development in 1986, shortly after the release of Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels. With Shigeru Miyamoto and Takashi Tezuka as the directors, they wanted to move away from the more difficult level design of the Lost Levels, and instead go all out with the presentation, gameplay, and sound to make a completely fresh experience from the previous titles. Initially, the game was going to utilize a top-down camera view a la The Legend of Zelda, but the team realized that making precise jumps as Mario would be incredibly difficult, so the idea was scrapped and reworked into a traditional side-scrolling view like the previous games. Due to the development team wanting to add so many new ideas into the title, Super Mario Bros. 3 ended up getting delayed by 6 months, solidifying its release date on October 23, 1988. In Japan, because in America we had to wait a year and a half to play the game. I mean, hey, at least America didn't have to wait nearly 2 years to play the game, you know, like how PAL regions had to. The reason Super Mario Bros. 3 took so long to leave Japan was due to a shortage of ROM chips present in NES games at the time. So to hold over consumers who desperately wanted more Mario action, Nintendo partnered with Universal Studios to create a movie that would provide a sneak peek to the highly anticipated sequel. That movie was called The Wizard, and it was released on December of 1989, a whole 2 months before Mario 3 released in North America. And man, you can really tell that this movie was only made to promote Mario 3. It isn't a horrible movie, but it's not all that interesting, and the only really memorable thing about it is the Super Mario Bros. 3 section towards the end of the film. A lot of people seem to agree too, considering critics didn't really like it at the time either. But hey, it was the first movie Tobey Maguire was ever in, so it's got that going for it at least. Despite what people think of The Wizard, people were still excited for Mario 3, and when the game was released in North America on February 12, 1990, it was praised as one of the greatest games on the NES and even one of the greatest games of all time. The plot begins with Bowser and his army invading the 7 kingdoms of the world, turning the kings of each kingdom into animals in the process, with the use of each kingdom's magic wand. Bowser entrusts each kingdom's wand to his children, the Koopalings, who make their first debut in this game, and it's up to Mario and Luigi to save the day. After beating all the Koopalings and freeing the 7 kings, the Mario Brothers receive a letter from Bowser informing them that he has kidnapped the princess because it just wouldn't be a Mario game without the princess getting kidnapped. From there, Mario and Luigi beat Bowser, save the princess, who makes the princess in another castle joke, and the credits roll. Talk about an anticlimactic ending. But hey, it doesn't matter because the entire game is actually just a stage play, as confirmed by Shigeru Miyamoto and indicated by a curtain rising on the game's title screen. It's a Mario game, so the plot is of course incredibly simple, but it is still kind of odd how they throw in Peach getting kidnapped at the very end as opposed to setting it up at the beginning. The game being a stage play is pretty interesting though, considering many levels in the game do look like built sets, but it's not like it adds too much in the grand scheme of things. Also, who the hell would pay money to see a play like this? Who wrote this crap? Onto the actual game itself, and man, this game looks great. The game is incredibly colorful and characters and enemies look great compared to some of their older sprites. I do still prefer Mario 2's Mario sprite, but the one in Mario 3 isn't that bad to look at. The music isn't half bad either, and as a whole it has a much more unique sounding soundtrack compared to other Mario games, especially with the world map tunes. Another thing I like about this game's presentation is that the worlds and levels now have themes to them, many of which becoming series staples. You have your grass world, which calmly introduces you to the gameplay and mechanics, a desert world, a water world, a giant world I guess, a sky world, an ice world, a pipe world that's literally named Pipeland, that's an unfortunate name, and finally a dark world where you face off against Bowser and run into these hands that drag Mario to the depths of hell. Each world has a world map as mentioned previously, where you select levels, find bonus huts for power-ups and goodies, face roaming enemies, mostly being Hammer Brothers, who are thankfully much easier to deal with now compared to their Mario 1 counterparts, and pipes to fast travel to certain parts of the map. In the bonus huts you can play this roulette game to score extra lives, which I'm terrible at, just like the roulette in Mario 2, a card matching game, or the choice of opening 3 chests to score power-ups. One thing I like about these bonus games is that some of them have Mario's sprite reflect on what power-up he has at the time. So if you're small Mario, you get the sprite, which really just doesn't look right. Like, why is he so small? Anyway, levels now are much shorter, but that also means there are no checkpoints in the levels, and the amount of levels in general are much greater than the amounts in the previous Mario games. Thankfully, you can find items that can let you skip certain levels if you just don't want to deal with it at the time. These items can include clouds, which simply let you move past a level, a hammer that lets you destroy rocks on the map, and most importantly, the warp whistle. Like the previous games, you have a way to skip entire worlds, this time through the warp whistle found in certain levels. Using the warp whistle plays a tune directly ripped from The Legend of Zelda, and sends you to the warp zone, allowing you to choose which world to skip to. As for the actual gameplay, I really like how Mario controls in this game. His jump height and overall speed are much better than the previous games, and overall Mario's movements feel less slippery and more precise, which just feels nice. Mario can now slide down the newly introduced slopes, which help to make level designs feel less rudimentary than previously. You can also pick up and kick blocks in some levels, which is neat, I guess. Gaining a certain amount of speed while running will help to fill up your P meter, that's an unfortunate name. When the meter is full, Mario is granted a bigger jump, or can allow you to fly up in the air with the use of a super leaf. I guess that means we can talk about the power-ups now. Alongside the returning Mushroom, Fire Flower, Star, and 1-Up Mushroom, a ton of new power-ups have been added, and all of them are pretty cool. The most notable power-up introduced to this game is obviously the Super Leaf, giving Mario raccoon ears and a tail. As mentioned earlier, filling up the P meter with the Super Leaf allows Mario to fly up into the air for a bit, but he can also shortly hover with it by pressing the jump button in the air, as well as use a little spin attack that's incredibly short range and not that great. Yeah, I'm not a fan of the spin attack. I always end up getting hit when using it, and I'd much rather use a Fire Flower in most instances. The hover is awesome though, and using it after flying up into the air can allow you to skip over most of these levels considering how short they are. As for the other power-ups, there's the frog suit that is incredible underwater, especially with how badly Mario controls underwater now. But on land it's pretty useless, therefore making a pretty good power-up into something incredibly situational. The Tanooki suit turns Mario into his Tanooki persona, but in gameplay it's pretty much just a super leaf with the added ability of turning into a stone statue. Okay. You can get the magical P-Wing after beating a world, and it's basically just another super leaf, but with the added benefit of giving you a maxed out P meter that never runs out for one level only. It's lame that it's just a one-use item, but it can be an easy way to beat those harder levels should you need it. There's the Goomba shoe that only appears in one level, but allows you to stomp on spiked enemies and cross spiky ground, and it's pretty cool despite being in one level. And finally, there's the hammer suit, allowing you to become the apex predator that is the Hammer Brother. This power-up is awesome because its hammers can take out most enemies with ease, even ones that can't be defeated by fireballs, and it protects you from enemy projectiles when crouched down. The biggest downside to this power-up though is that it's incredibly rare, so you probably won't get to use it much during your playthrough. All the power-ups are pretty cool if a little situational, but they're really great to use and actually feel helpful to get in levels. You can also stock up on power-ups found in the overworld and select which one you want to use before starting a level, which is pretty neat. Much like the power-ups, there are a ton of new enemies added, with many of them becoming series staples after this game. All the enemies from the first game and some from the second return, but alongside them are the newly introduced Chain Chomps, Thwomps, Boos, Drive Bones, and even the sun itself. There are obviously the Koopalings, Larry, Morton, Wendy, Iggy, Roy, Lemmy, and Ludwig, who can be found at each world's airship levels, and they're all pretty easy to beat. You pretty much just have to bonk on their heads 3 times, and they don't really put up much of a fight outside of sometimes throwing out projectiles like bouncy balls. But hey, at least they're not Boom Boom. This guy can be found in each world's fortress levels, and he's absolutely pathetic. If you get the timing right with your jumps, you can beat this guy in less than 5 seconds, and he never gets more complicated than that. Now he can grow wings and fly, but that's only if you somehow miss your jumps, which you probably won't do often. Anyway, the enemies in this game are definitely formidable, but they never feel completely unfair to go up against. Unless they're in an airship or tank level, in which the game will throw hundreds of them at you, which can be overwhelming at times, mostly because the levels are auto-scrollers, which sadly make their debut here as well. I'm not a huge fan of auto-scrollers, but outside of the airship and tank levels, they're not too difficult in this game. They could move a little bit faster though. As a whole, Mario 3 finds a nice balance in difficulty in its levels. The easy levels are fun to go through, and the challenging levels can be really challenging, but the game is pretty generous with 1-ups. For example, at the end of every level you can get a card, and getting 3 cards will provide you with 1 or 5 extra lives, depending if you have 3 of one set or just 3 in general. Not only that, but the map bonuses are plentiful, and there are plenty of levels that provide coins to get extra lives, so the game isn't all that punishing. If you do run out of lives though, you will lose all the progress you made on the current world you're on, but hey, I'll take that over being booted to the beginning of the game like what Mario 2 did. The 2-player mode from Mario 1 returns, allowing player 2 to play as Luigi, who sadly plays exactly like Mario again, and doesn't retain his floatier jump or slipperiness from the Mario 2s. You can play a little mini version of Mario Brothers where you can try to steal each other's gold cards, but I don't have any friends who would want to play this with me, and you can't play this game with a banana. What a bummer. In the end, Mario 3 is one of the most important Mario games ever made for what it introduced to the franchise moving forward, and it's just a really fun game as a whole. The game can be kind of difficult at times, but this game's controls, level design, music, and presentation easily make it the best of the NES Mario games. It just builds up on the foundation of the previous games in so many different ways, and it's just a really engaging experience from beginning to end. Super Mario Bros. 3 is one of the best 2D Mario games ever made, and its replayability and charm make it something that I would happily revisit someday. But the game is unplayable for bananas, so I will have to dock some points for that.